How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at Hellraiser III, Hell on Earth. This came out in 1992 and was directed by Anthony Hickox. The movie stars Terry Farrell, Paula Marshall, and Kevin Bernhardt. We also, of course, have Doug Bradley back as Pinhead, and a special appearance from Ashley Laurence, albeit very, very brief. And I have to say, Hellraiser 3 is pretty fun. It has a lot of cool stuff going for it, but all that being said, it's not near as good as the first two. The first one is an absolute good, creepy classic. Then in Hellbound, we actually got to see Hell, and it felt like a continuation and expansion upon the first. Hellraiser 3 is the first one to feel more like a traditional sequel-y sequel. It mirrors some of the events of the first one, but for the most part is unrelated characters telling a completely different story. It feels a little bit more commercial, a little bit more like a Nightmare on Elm Street sequel, and we'd also get things like them playing pretty fast and loose with the rules here, and then some plot lines not having proper weight and kind of fizzling out a bit. But that being said, in general I do like the new characters, and we also have a lot more screen time from Doug Bradley. That's always a huge plus. The movie for the first two acts is pretty solid, but it's when we get to that third act that things really heat up. The big nightclub sequence goes nuts, and we do get a bunch of fun, new, albeit kind of campy Cenobites. And I don't care what people say, yeah, the one that throws CDs at you is silly, but I do love it. So yeah, it's a sequel in the more episodic sense rather than the continuation sense, and I think that's the biggest thing. I really wish we had stuck with Ashley Laurence, and I really wish we had went farther in the direction that Hellbound had set up. I mean, Hell on Earth, that's kind of fun. But you know what was cooler than that? Actually seeing Hell. And you go up to that high and you're like, wow, look at all this cool stuff they did. I really wish each sequel had pushed it farther, and I really wish we got to just go further and further into the wacky world of Hell. But no, we're kind of pulling back and becoming more of a traditional 80s goofy horror movie. Yeah, I know it's technically a 90s movie, but it feels very much like a campy 80s sequel. Overall, not as good as the first two, but a ton of fun to be had. And definitely way better than pretty much all of the sequels that would come after it. I mean, Judgment was pretty cool, and I still haven't seen the reboot yet, but whatever. Hellraiser 3 ranks pretty highly, although there's a huge gap between this and then 1 and 2. But all that being said, I do want to break down and analyze this movie and talk a bit about what works and doesn't. So from here on out, we're going to be talking a little bit about the plot, but I'll focus primarily on setup pieces, and I'll try to avoid ruining any of the end bits. So let's go ahead and take a deeper dive. Our main character in this movie is Terry Farrell's character. She's a reporter named Joey, and she's having this problem where she wants to be taken seriously and she wants to get better assignments, but she's kind of stuck on the B-sides. She does a story about this hospital, and it just so happens to be the most boring night in hospital history, and she's upset because there's no story here. She has a good relationship with her cameraman Doc, who's trying to encourage her, but she's really frustrated, and eventually Doc has to leave to go cover another story. But wouldn't you know it, right after the cameraman leaves is when the action heats up. People bring in this man, a club goer who for whatever reason has a bunch of chains stuck into him. And Joey gets to see this man all of a sudden pulled apart by these chains and literally torn to shreds. She follows through with the woman that brought the guy in, and her name is Terry, which is a little confusing because the actress of the other girl is Terry, but whatever. And it turns out Terry has the puzzle box, and she tells this story about how she found this mysterious pillar in an art gallery, showed it to her boyfriend, J.P. Monroe, who is the club owner, and the chains attacked him when Terry and this other random club goer pulled the puzzle box out of this bronze column. And now Joey's on the case to try to figure out what exactly is going on here. Now, happening simultaneously to this is J.P. Monroe's story. He's in his bedroom with a new girl, and when the girl gets close enough to the statue that Pinhead's trapped inside, he shoots chains out of his mouth and eats her, and then she's added to the statue. He talks to J.P. Monroe and says, "You're a man who enjoys pleasure. I can show you this. You can be my right-hand man. Just feed people to me so that I can eventually get out of here." And here we can see the parallels to what they were doing in Hellraiser 1 and 2. J.P. Monroe is now the new Frank Cotton, and rather than having Frank or Julia, this time we have to feed people to Pinhead himself, and now Pinhead is the proper main villain of this movie. And yeah, I do like Uncle Frank way better than J.P. Monroe. Uncle Frank was just so iconic and had such a presence to him. J.P. Monroe is a little bit more of a goofy, self-indulgent character. A little bit more on the comedy side, because again, this is going for a cheesy 80s movie feel, but again, whatever. The thing that bugs me though is we do get, as I said earlier, really fast and loose with these rules. Pinhead is going to kill several people, and if they didn't solve the box, why is Pinhead allowed to kill them? I don't know. They just have to get close enough to his pillar. And also the pillar looks different than how it did in Hellraiser 2. In Hellraiser 2 it was like made out of wood and had like mask on the side of it or something. I guess the deal is Pinhead must have killed people between movies, and all this extra stuff is just the layering of absorbing people into the pillar? I don't know. And where are the other Cenobites? I mean, I thought they were all absorbed into the pillar, but no, it's apparently just Pinhead? Yeah, I don't know. Don't think too much about it, right? Again, playing a little bit fast and loose, but we are getting the plot going. We're gonna feed people to Pinhead, and eventually that moment is going to get forced to his crisis, and big explosive finale. And I do like the over-the-top kind of campy nature of it. As I hinted at earlier, we do get more Cenobites. And they are pretty goofy Cenobites that all have like a gimmick with what they did when they were people. I have no idea how Pinhead's able to turn them into Cenobites so quickly, especially because it seems like some of them were 100% like dead first. And I guess you can turn a corpse into a Cenobite? Who knows? I don't know what the rules are here. But again, third act, good goofy 80s cheese that technically came out in the 90s. Now, as I said, some of the character follow-through moments aren't perfect. Like, I do like the two female leads, the professional reporter girl, and then the girl that really doesn't know what to do or where to go. The character of Terry kind of reminds me of that girl from Ernest Saves Christmas, if things got way worse for her. And I do like the back and forth. But that being said, like, I like Joey, but the whole motivation of her wanting to be like a cool ace reporter doesn't really come up too much in the rest of the movie. And she also has this backstory where her father was left behind in the war, presumed dead, and that really doesn't affect things too much emotionally. Like, she gets sad from it every now and then, but we don't really get to see how it drives her character, and that could be really cool. Like, I'm afraid from this past trauma, and that's making me obsessively want to do better at my job, but it doesn't ever get that deep. And then instead, this thing with the war flashback actually does a pretty cool tie-in to Hellraiser lore, but it kind of becomes plot-heavy and goes off on like this weird tangent. Now, I do want to say with the ending, and again, I'm going to be super vague in regards to this, but the movie does kind of forget about the characters of J.P. Monroe and Terry for a good while, and they were such a driving force of the first two acts that when they do disappear, it is definitely noticeable. And again, I feel like with the driving force and the characters, a lot of it does get forgotten about as the movie goes on. And also again with the rules, when the reporter finds out what she's supposed to do, it is kind of vague and a little bit wishy-washy. She's supposed to do one thing and then she winds up kind of going about it sideways, and I kind of wish the character she had heard a lot of this from had been a little more specific, but whatever, we're out there doing goofy shenanigans. I guess the rules can work this way too, why not? So yeah, it's the Hellraiser unrelated kind of episodic sequel thing. Cool elements, maybe not 100% thought out, maybe playing a little fast and loose with the rules, and maybe it does get a little bit goofy. I would have rather had further adventures with Ashley Laurence going deeper into hell, but still a fun Hellraiser movie, and I don't mind a bit of cheese. And I'd much rather have something like this than the Jacob's Ladder clones that a lot of the sequels would be. So yeah, not 1 and 2, but still a fun movie, and if you go into it for fun, you'll be happy. Anyway, I'd be curious what you guys think of this movie. What's your favorite of the Hellraiser sequels? And did you think the new Cenobites were too campy? Let me know down in the comments. Anyway, all that being said, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Hellraiser playlist where I've talked about the past 2 movies and even talked about the Hellbound Heart, the book. So if you want to see me talk about more things kind of like this, feel free to click right here and see more. Anyway, have a good day. See you guys again very, very soon. Playlist here. Have a good day now.